Welcome one and all to the YouTube channel with as a catchphrase. Everything is interesting. And today, A is for Aargau, Argo, and Argot. This might be a long one because there's quite a lot I want to talk about, so we will see. So, Aargau. Aargau is a canton in the north of Switzerland. It's a little area in Switzerland which nowadays doesn't really have much to offer. If you go onto this tourist website of Argo, it's just like, oh, we're Switzerland, so mountains, and oh, you can be calm and take walks and stuff. Usually, if that's what they're pointing out, there's not much to do, and that's fine. But Argo houses a castle called Habsburg Castle, which is deeply important because Habsburg Castle spawned the house of the Habsburgs, and Habsburgs, they have been important. They have been immensely important, that's not a word, but whatever, to European history, like crazy. And to understand exactly why they've been so important, we have to go back to a time where European history is run through monarchies. We tend to forget this, maybe, but the democracy which has rolled across Europe over the last 100 years or so is a pretty new experiment, really. Europe was not particularly democratic until 150 years ago or so. Like, the US is a much older democracy than anything Europe can really present. So we have to remember that in the old days, and for hundreds of years, much longer than democracy has been giving its try, Europe has been run by monarchies. And monarchies meaning, in this case, one person who's born and is told, oh, by the way, when you're older, you get to rule this place. This is yours now when you're older. And your qualifications are you came out of the correct queen, to put it a bit bluntly, but it's true. The only thing you needed to become the king was to be born from the last one. That's basically how monarchies work. They're sort of inherited through genes. Now, there's a lot of problems with this, which I will get to because the Habsburgs are a pretty good example of it. But, compared to a democracy, you don't earn it. Basically, there is no way you can replace the king with somebody who is much more qualified, because that's just not how the monarchy works. You have to go with whoever you get. And a guy called George Carlin, who is a podcaster who does amazing history podcasts, by the way. He has a podcast called Hardcore History. He's so interesting, oh my God. He describes this concept as the role of the monarchy dice, which I think is a fantastic way of putting it. Like, you might get a great king. You might have somebody who's born into this and really, really, really knows how to run a country. That might happen. You might get lucky. However, you may just as well get unlucky. And you just don't know what you get. You have this baby, and the baby is going to be king one day. There's just nothing you can do about that. But maybe the baby is a moron, So some babies are morons. Or at least there will be, I guess all babies are morons, if you're going to be completely fair about it. I mean, they don't. I don't try to insult babies. If any babies are watching who understand what I'm saying, then you are certainly not a moron. I mean, wow, impressive. However, if you are a baby and you're watching, you're probably not getting much of this. You're probably just watching my pen go wee. And, I mean, babies are. Okay, I stand by my original statement. Babies are morons. Have you looked at a baby? Have you seen how they respond to the world? They're idiots. They don't understand anything. Like, you can play this game with babies. I'm getting so distracted now, but I don't even care. You play this game with babies where you put your hands over your head. Not over your head. You would have very big hands. You'd have put your hands over your face so that your face is not visible. And the baby's just like, wow! Harry Potter over here! You made your face disappear! And then you take your hands off your face and your face reappears, and the baby's just like, how do you do that? And they're just laughing their heads off. They think it's the greatest trick I've ever seen, because they don't have what's called object permanence. They don't understand that something can exist even though you can't see it. So honestly, if you have to entertain a baby, until they're about 5 months old, I suppose, if you have to entertain a baby, just do that. Just show them their toy, and then put the toys like under a table so they can't see it. And the baby's just like, aha, the toy has dematerialized. It does not exist in any form and anywhere in the universe. and then you bring it back and it goes, oh my god, the magician has recreated my toy out of thin air. Ha 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 ha. And they're sort of panicking, of course, by this black magic. They're just like, hee hee. So they're happy morons, but they are morons. Also, again, distraction time, complete distraction time. If you look at a baby who hasn't understood that their body is part of them yet, that's pretty funny. Sometimes you can look at a baby and the baby doesn't get that their hands are something that they can control. You have to be pretty young. But, you know, when they're very young, they don't get that. So they're lying on their back, just being a baby. And because they can't control their own body, their hands are just flapping around all over the place. And sometimes they will hit themselves in the head with their own hand. And they'll get really annoyed because somebody hit them. Like, what the hell? Somebody is punching me and I can't do anything about it. And that's just... It's pretty funny to watch. I mean, I'm not trying to say that it's amusing to watch a baby get beaten up. Please don't conclude that that's my opinion. I'm saying it's pretty funny to watch a baby be a moron. And I stand by that. I stand by that completely. Babies are cute. I'm not saying they're not, but they are not intelligent. Anyway, back to monarchy. You have this baby, and you're looking at this baby being a complete moron and thinking, shit, like, within 30 years or something, this little stupid human is going to be running a kingdom. I sure hope he gets better at being a human than what he is right now. And that's the problem about monarchies. Because in democracy, you don't have that issue. You don't have, like, President Obama. You don't elect him when he's, like, 1 day old. And you're just like, this guy, little Barack here, he'll be a good president, because you just don't know. I mean, you can have his parents are probably pretty brilliant, I guess, but you don't know. You know, again, a roll of the monarchy dice. But that is how we ran Europe for centuries, if not millennia. That's how things were done. And back to Aargau, where the House of Habsburg is spawned. The House of Habsburg ran huge chunks of Europe for hundreds of years. They were continuously on the throne. They were emperors of the Holy Roman Empire. If you haven't heard of the Holy Roman Empire, it sounds really cool, doesn't it? But that's just Germany. I'm sorry. I don't mean to diss Germany. Germany's a very nice place, but it was just Germany. It sounds cooler. That's all I can say. Like, the Roman Empire was great. Big and scary and, like, in Asterix and all that. And now you add holy to it, that just gets even cooler, right? But it's just Germany. So, sorry. But they ran the Holy Roman Empire for 300 years without a break, and they also spread out like a virus all over Europe, and, you know, to Spain, to the Netherlands, to I don't know, all kinds of places. Philip II of Spain, the guy I talked about earlier, about being the guy who hated the Jews and chased all the Jews to Antwerp and all that stuff, he was a Habsburg. He came from this family, this huge family which ran Europe. Now, the reason they're not running Europe anymore, aside from the fact that Europe has kind of grown out of monarchies in general, and we figured out that maybe we should think a little bit more about who runs our countries. The reason they actually stopped being so powerful is because they had one bad idea. They said, wow, we are Habsburgs, we are running everything, we're great, we should probably keep our bloodlines clean. In the pure Slytherin sense, they were just like, ooh, we can't mix ourselves with the Muggles, we should keep our bloodlines clean. So they married each other and had babies with each other to a quite large extent. Now, you can't blame the Habsburgs for not knowing this, but of course, well, maybe you can blame them, I don't know, but they ran into a bit of a genetic trap there, because, as people know now, if you marry your brother too much, please don't marry your brother too much, marry him once, and that's enough. Now, if you keep having children with your close family, you end up having inbreeding problems. The genetics go down the toilet. You have to sort of import new genes from outside the gene pool, otherwise you really do get some issues here. That's exactly what happened to the Habsburgs. The Habsburgs ended up breeding themselves to death, to put that neatly. How can we... let me think. What was his name? Charles II of Spain, I think. Charles II of Spain was the last Habsburg of Spain. And he was broken, genetically broken. He suffered from every illness, like there was nothing he didn't suffer from. He just got everything. Basically, imagine the MMR vaccine, the one that you give children now to avoid all these illnesses. Just take the list of the illnesses it vaccinates you against and just give all those illnesses to one person. That's Charles II, including that he was just deformed physically because he had what's called a Habsburg jaw. That sounds quite disturbing, but it was something that you could recognize these Habsburg kings and queens by, because they all looked alike, obviously, because they're all having babies with each other. But the Habsburg jaw was like a jutting, pronounced jaw, and the more inbred they got, the more this jaw just got in the way. You have to kind of think of them like bulldogs. You know those bulldogs that have been bred to have that little flat nose? I'm not quite sure why, but I mean, some people seem to want flat noses on their dogs. And you can breed the dogs until they have so flat noses that they hardly can breathe. I mean, if you look at a bulldog, that thing is certainly not something that would survive in the wild. I'm not dissing a bulldog. I'm just saying that if you let a bulldog try to live in the forest, the bulldog would choke on its own spit and die within a week. It needs humans to keep it alive. That's just a fact, okay? They can hardly breathe. If you're ever silent with a bulldog, if you're ever like cuddling all alone with a bulldog in the in the darkness of the night, you will hear it going because it's bred to the point where it can't breathe properly. Now, I'm sorry, but that's just not a very good move. And that's essentially what the Habsburgs were. The Habsburgs were the bulldog of royalty. Their jaws were so pronounced that they could hardly eat. And they could hardly speak. And it's just, oh, dear more. And especially Charles II, his Habsburg jaw was just really, really messing up his life. So he looks weird. If you look at a portrait of Charles II, you can see it very clearly. And you can tell that the portrait guy is doing his very best to make him look like a king. But you just can't polish a shit. I'm so sorry. I'm being so mean. But it's true. He doesn't look very regal. He looks like an inbred guy, because that's exactly what he was. Also, mentally, he was not all there. There's a story, right? And this is true, that he was asked by his sister, who was actually running the country, because Charles II couldn't do anything. He was asked, for some reason, I really don't know why, his sister asked him to sleep next to his father's corpse. Yes, you heard me. She said, you have to sleep next to your father's corpse, and I don't know why. But he did. Now, people who are apologising for Charles II said that, yes, okay, fine, yes, he slept next to his father's dead body. Yes, that's weird. But he did it because he was asked to do it, so he's not crazy. That seems to be the excuse. Now, I'm not a royal historian. I'm not a historian at all. But to me, if you agree to sleeping next to your father's dead body, like every night, I don't really care that you were asked to do it. If you do it, you're not all there mentally. I'm sorry. I'm just sorry. I would have to be asked very nicely to do that before I actually did it. I think my natural response to, hey, would you like to sleep next to your father's dead body, would be, no thanks. I have a bed. I'll just sleep there. Thanks. Or probably be like, but why? Why? And I don't think you'd be able to give me a good enough reason. I really don't know what it would take to make me sleep next to my father's dead body. But it would, yeah, okay, fine. So, inbreeding, yes? That was my point. So, really the Habsburg Empire, whatever you can call them, come to be this nice example of how monarchy power has its natural limit. You can't continue having these small families running the show by producing lots of inbred little kings and queens and princesses and princes and stuff, because it just ends up the wrong way. Modern monarchies, because of course monarchies still exist, modern monarchies don't have any power whatsoever, but they do exist, and they've kind of figured this out. They tend to marry the commoners, as they say, and they sort of bring in genes from far away to make themselves less weird. Because we really also, if you look at some of these dukes and duchesses today who have been like bred, I'm telling you, they don't look healthy. Anyway, have I dissed the royals enough? Yes, I think I have. Aargau, as I say, is this little canton in Switzerland in which the Habsburgs spawned and spread all over virus land, spread all over Europe like an inbred little virus, like COVID-19, but with crowns on their heads and also humans. So probably not the most natural comparison, but still, the Habsburgs did have a huge amount of power, and I guarantee you, if you look into European history, especially in the Middle Ages and ahead from that, you will meet Habsburgs like all the time. They run all the way up to about World War One. They're pretty important. So that's pretty cool, yeah. I think. Okay, so let's move on from Aargau and go to Argo. Now, Argo is pronounced in English. This is a really cool story for many reasons. Let's start with what Argo even is. Because Argo, the actual meaning of the word Argo is not what I want to talk about, but I think we should just mention it anyway because everything is interesting. And it comes from Greek mythology. Greeky mythology. Argo is the ship that Jason and the Argonauts are sailing around with, having their adventures. And the reason this is interesting is not because the adventures themselves are interesting, even though they're pretty cool, because they're Greek myths, come on, they're always cool. But more like the concept of it. Because the Argonauts are undeniably the Greek ancient world's version of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's what it is. Like, they're the Avengers. And I mean, Avengers start with an A, so I can almost justify talking about the Avengers, even though I don't really know anything about them. I'm sorry. I kind of wish that I did. I just can't get into the movies. I wish that I could. I really do wish that I could have the same experience that so many people have, and they love it, and they can't wait for the movies to come out and stuff. And it's such a cool project, like making this huge interconnected story of movies. It's like the world's most expensive TV show, and I think it's a really cool idea. I just can't quite make my brain believe all this stuff. It's like, as much as I'm trying to get into it, it's just like, wait, hold on. This is still like a god from Heimdall and from Valhalla, whatever it is, playing around with a guy who's dressed like a robot and the big green guy who got irradiated, and none of this makes sense. I can't. I'm watching Spider-Man, and it's just like, wait, he's fighting a green goblin on a surfboard. This doesn't happen. So basically, I'm just caught in my own stupid brain, and I can't enjoy them. It's my fault. It's my fault. Don't send me hate mail. I understand that I am suffering because of my own stupid brain. Okay, promise. But the Avengers, right? The point of the Avengers, the thing that I do find cool, even though I can't enjoy it, is that they have like separate stories, origin stories, for each of these superheroes, and then they meet, and all these origin stories like collide in a big collected universe, and that's badass and cool, right? I love that. I love that concept. The Argonauts are exactly the same. They're all like various heroes from Greek mythology who have their own stories and own myths, who just team up with Jason, and they go like hunting for cool, adventures together. And you've got Hercules, and you've got all these other guys who have their own stories, and they meet in these stories. That's cool. That's undeniably awesome. Yes. But Argo, in this case, is just the ship. There's nothing else but that. But Argo is also the name of a movie, which is one of the most interesting movies that doesn't exist. Yes, I'll leave it like that, shall I? Maybe I should just leave it like that and end the episode. No, I will not. Argo is a movie which is incredibly important, but it doesn't exist. It's a fake movie. It never existed, but it was invented by the CIA. The Central Intelligence Agency of the US invented a fake movie called Argo. A science fiction movie. Why, you may scream? Well, I shall tell you why. Stop screaming, by the way. It's all due to what happened in Iran in the late 70s, which is still going on today. So now we're going to go looking at a lot more sort of recent history than the Habsburgy stuff. In the late 70s, Iran was a pretty westernized nation. It had a Shah, which was like the king, I suppose, of Iran, who was very friendly to the US, and everything was quite Western. It was very sort of, it was modern in many ways. It doesn't sound like the Iran we know, and the reason it doesn't sound that way is that there was a revolution, an Islamist revolution, where the fundamentalist Islamic powers in the country took over, and they stole away the country from the westernized powers, and they threw away the Shah. And they became extraordinarily anti-American because, you know, the Shah of Iran, the Shah of Iran was not a great guy. He was a little bit sort of, he did not live up to Islamist values. I can understand why the Islamic powers in Iran were not happy about him, but because he was backed by the US, he was like supported by the US. It was pretty much a protectorate, like, almost like a puppet government kind of thing, I suppose. So the Islamists in Iran became super anti-American, and they still are to this day. The Ayatollah, who is the sort of the supreme priest, the supreme imam, I suppose, of Iran today in 2020, if you listen to his opinions about the US, he's not a fan. Let's just put it that way. And basically, Iranian public foreign policy is very much boo to the US. We don't like the US, the American devil, they call them, and all that. It's not amazing. So, already, still, the echo of what I'm about to tell you is going on. Anyway, big revolution. The Shah is tossed out of Iran, hides in the US, but it doesn't stop there. As I said, Iran was very American, so of course there's a huge American embassy in Iran at this time, with lots of American diplomats living in there and all that kind of stuff. That's not the best place to live during a revolution in which Islamist forces are rejecting everything American. You may be able to imagine that it was a little bit scary to be living in that embassy. And lo and behold, what happened was that a bunch of Iranian students decided to storm the embassy and take the American diplomats hostage. Now, this is a huge problem, obviously. This is called the Iranian hostage crisis in the late 70s, and these poor diplomats are trapped. And, you know, some of them escape, but, you know, there's a lot of hostages. 6 American diplomats managed to escape, and they are housed by Canadians and British people. There's a Canadian guy called John Sheardown who houses these 6 diplomats for months. I mean, at great personal risk. If that was ever discovered, he would have been very much shot in the very much head. So that was very good that he didn't do that. That he wasn't discovered, at least. But, you know, there's this big problem with these poor American diplomats who need to get out. And, of course, the Americans know about this, and they want to get them out. And thus comes this really cool thing that the CIA invents. And they call this the Canadian Caper. Now, hold on to your hats and glasses. This is certainly not what you expect the CIA to be doing. But what they do is they have to get these American diplomats out, right? They have to somehow smuggle these people out. So the conclusion becomes that if we can just get some Canadian passports into their hands, that should be okay. They could, you know, pretend to be Canadians, whatever. But it's really difficult for Americans, obviously, to get into Iran because, you know, hostage crisis, because a revolution, because American devil, because all that. So what they come up with, and this is amazing, is that they buy a script to a movie, and they adapt it. They get some Hollywood scriptwriter to adapt it to take place on a planet with a sort of Middle Eastern feel. And they set up this whole fake movie. It's called Argo. And this fake movie, they make posters for it, they make business cards for it, they have a complete movie script for it, they set up a fake production company in LA, in Hollywood, so that somebody would answer the phone if anybody checks if this is real or not. They advertise, as I say, and, you know, they basically make a huge psyop, also in America itself, to make people think that, okay, there's a new big movie coming out. And this new big movie is going to be called Argo, and it's going to be set in a Middle Eastern area. How cool. And it's all just to make the Iranian government believe that there's an American production company who wants to come to Iran to scout for locations. And it works. they managed to smuggle in the CIA operative, Mendez is his name, Tony Mendez, who manages to get into Iran on the back of this lie, on the back of this fake movie thing, which he has to fake, or obviously he has to pretend to be looking for locations, all this kind of stuff. So what we have here is a CIA agent who's pretending to be a movie producer, and he manages to get in touch with these American diplomats, and he manages to get these fake Canadian passports, who he has made, of course. He's smuggled them in too, and they manage to escape. They get to the airport, they get out. And in an incredible coincidence, which I have to mention, the aircraft is named Aargau, named after the canton in Switzerland from which the Habsburgs emerged. It's just completely randomly the aircraft, because they fly to Switzerland. There is a flight from from Iran, Tehran to Zurich, and it's named after this canton, Argo, which I was talking about just before. So that's cool, obviously. This whole story, which is insanely cool, and it was all secret, of course. This is a complete secret mission. Nobody really knew the details about this until 1997, where everything was declassified from the CIA. They have some kind of time limit to how long you can keep a secret in the CIA. So it was also released in 1997. That's when we knew all the details about all this stuff. Everything was kept completely secret, of course. And the only thing that people knew at the time was that the Canadians had helped to get these diplomats out. And there's this huge pro-Canadian movement in the US. Briefly, I must add, the Americans were very big fans of the Canadians, and you can find signs be like, "Thank you, Canada, oh my lord." But of course, pretty quickly, they went back to hating the Canadians because, the Americans. So, yeah, that's what happened. All this was made into a movie, also called Argo, which won the Academy Award because it's actually really good. So if I am recommending a movie, which I am, I would say you should watch Argo. Argo is actually a pretty cool movie when it comes down to it. So yeah, it fictionalizes a lot of it, of course, but they do tell the story of the Canadian caper. They tell what happened with the movie production company and the smuggling out of them and all this kind of stuff. So that is pretty awesome. So I am almost through the half an hour, and I can see already that I will not be able to finish talking about the last one I want to talk about, which is Argo. So I'm going to run long. I think I'm going to go 45 minutes on this one, and you're just going to have to deal with that. And I'm not sure how that I'm going to... We'll see. I haven't made any decisions. Anyway, that's not something I should be talking about while I'm doing it. So, let's see. Argot, spelled A-R-G-O-T, is a French term. And that's about something completely different. But there is also an amount of secrecy and sort of subterfuge involved here. Not subterfuge in the sense of fake production companies and fake movies, but more subterfuge in the sense of fake languages. Now, language, of course, I don't think I need to tell you this, because you're not one of those babies I was mocking before, but language is intended for communication. That means that we want to be as well understood as we possibly can. That's the whole point of language, right? Although in some situations the opposite is necessary. Sometimes language is needed to conceal information from other people, in the sense of something called a cat. Now, I'll tell you what that is in a moment. Before I get into that, I'll just talk about something called jargon, because jargon is also really difficult to understand language, but it's not intended to it's not intended to be difficult to understand, it just is. Specific nerds and experts in certain fields will be able to talk jargonese with each other. Like, for instance, a physicist would be able to talk about, relativistic Doppler shifts on the femtoscale in the CMBR or whatever. And other physicists would know what that means, but most other people wouldn't. They would just what? And from my own university days, I remember very clearly, especially computer scientists have a very complicated language that they can speak to each other in, and they completely understand each other because they are educated in the terms that are used. But for everyone else, it just seems like a foreign language. But it's not an attempt to keep people out. It's just, you just have to sort of have read the same books and attended the same lectures to really fully understand what they're talking about. That's normal, right? A cant, or an argot, is different because it is designed to be impossible, or difficult at least, to understand for people who are not in the know. It's almost like a code language. And it can be completely a fully different language. In principle, it could have its own vocabulary, its own grammar, and have nothing to do with any other language. But in normal terms, what usually happens is that it's a variation of a language, which is that you start with the normal language that your friends also speak, and you kind of find ways of jiggling it about until it becomes difficult to understand for other people. There are lots of examples of this. The one that's probably most known is an American thing called Pig Latin. Pig Latin is basically, you can convert any English word into a Pig Latin word by taking the first consonant of the word, taking it off. So instead of, like, I'm holding a phone right now, so instead of phone it would become own, right? So you just deleted the first consonant, but you put that last consonant at the end of the word instead, and then you add the syllable a. So phone would become own fay, right? Painting would become ainting pay, for the same way. So it's not super difficult to talk Pig Latin. It's pretty much, if you can speak English and you can think just a little bit, you can speak Pig Latin with very little practice. But the reason Pig Latin exists is basically invented by parents who want to keep secrets from their children. Like, say if you want to go to Disneyland with your kid or something. I'm running out of ink. That's not great. Do I have another pen? I don't know. I refuse to stop my videos for any reason whatsoever. This has to be live. I've decided for no reason other than I'm stubborn. Okay, let's just hope this runs. No, I am absolutely running out of ink. Well, you know what? Since I just said that I refuse to stop, I'm going to live up to that. I'm going to put the phone down. I'm going to put the phone down on the painting, and I'll keep talking. Isn't this exciting, people? While I find another pen. So hold on. Yes, I know it's exciting. I know that you're really excited. I found another pen. There we are. And I ound fay another NPay. I bet this doesn't work. Yes, it does. Great. Wasn't that exciting? I bet that's going to happen again in later episodes. Maybe I should be more prepared. Oh well. Welcome to my life. So, Pig Latin, as I say, was invented to keep children from knowing what their parents are saying. So let's say they want to go to Disneyland, and if you can't, as a parent, obviously you can't just say in front of the kids, hey, I don't know, hey mummy, if you call your wife mummy. Some people do that, it's a bit weird. Hey mummy, should we take the kids to Disneyland? Then the kids will be just like, yay! And then if mummy says no, then of course chaos breaks out, and everybody hates each other forever, and that will be for lots of therapy later. So instead of doing that, you have to sort of be a little bit more tricky. So you can say, should we go to Isney Day and Lay? Right? And if you're a kid and you don't understand the rules of Pig Latin, then Isney Day and Lay just sounds like some shitty hip-hopper, right? Like, Disneyland and Lay. Nobody can figure out, can figure out that means Disneyland unless you know the rules. But of course the mummy knows Pig Latin as well, so she can say, oh nay, which is no. And then the chaos has been averted, right? But they should go to Disneyland. No, never mind. So that's basically what an Argo is intended to do. It is intended to sort of conceal information from those who are not supposed to hear it. And it's kind of interesting because it actually occurs historically in many contexts, really. So I'm going to talk about a few of them, just because everything is interesting, right? There we are. Also, I'm considering if I should start talking about what I'm actually painting, because sometimes I do have thoughts about what I want to paint in the lines, but I can't really talk about one thing and paint another, so possibly I will start talking about that kind of stuff too, but we will see. This is very clearly evolving in front of your very eyes, this kind of YouTube videoing. There is a British version of Pig Latin called Cockney rhyming slang, which is ridiculous, but it is spoken in London. And the way you can conceal your intentions with that is that you, instead of saying the actual word, you say a word which rhymes with it. Okay, that's the first step. So instead of stairs, you might say pears. Because who would want to hear the word stairs? Can I think of something where you want to conceal something like, ooh, like all the presents are up the stairs. This is like during Christmas preparations or something. So the kids are going like, where are all the presents? And whatever, you want to say. So instead of stairs, you say pears. Now that is not a difficult code to crack, right? You don't have to be that clever to be like, oh, the presents are up the pears. I wonder what that means. So that's only the first step of Cockney rhyming slang. The second one is to find a phrase which contains the word pears. In this case, it would be apples and pears, right? And then you leave out the actual rhyme. So you only say apples. So stairs becomes apples. Apples, apples and pears, stairs. Ooh. That requires a bit of memory because you need to understand what... You have to use the same phrase every time, obviously. Otherwise it gets a little confusing. So there's lots of those, and I can't remember any of them, but there are quite a lot of examples of how these Cockney rhyming slang things work. There's one I do remember, because it's a double rhyming double rhyming slang, and it is for bottom. Yes, bottom, the thing that I am sitting on right now, which isn't the sofa, the other bit that I'm... You know what I mean. A bottom is, in Cockney rhyming slang, a Harris. Like, oh, I'm sitting on me Harris, I hurt me Harris, ooh. That's how they talk, you see. And the way you hurt your Harris... No, hurt your Harris. My accent is not compatible with Cockney rhyming slang. I'm sorry. The way you hurt your Harris, or at least why it is a Harris, is that Harris is short for Aristotle. What? Aristotle, the Greek philosopher. Right? And Aristotle is Cockney rhyming slang for bottle. Right? Aristotle becomes bottle. And bottle is the first part of the phrase bottle and glass. Bottle and glass. Bottle and glass. And bottle and glass rhymes with arse. And arse is what a bottom is. So that's kind of very concealed. So, ooh, Harris is like double rhymes. So this is clearly an Argot, right? It's a language which you don't understand unless you really understand the rules for it. I want to mention a couple of other ones because they're kind of interesting when they become more... how do I even put this? Well, I suppose you could say that Cockney rhyming slang is, at least originally, only used by the working class of London. And that makes it an interesting linguistic artifact, really. Because the dialects are something where, you have a particular way of talking depending on where you are in the country. Like, it's a geographical thing. You are defined by your geography, at least your languages, right? Every country has dialects, and these people from different parts of the country speak in different ways. This is normal, yeah? But when you have something like only the working class speak this way, then it's called a sociolect, which I think is a really cool word. A sociolect is basically a way of talking with particular words and phrases which are sort of intended for only, well, not intended, but just observably only used by a particular class of people. It doesn't have to be like an economic class, it can also be like young people have a particular sociolect. This is true in most cases, really. I want to mention a French one because the French one is the one I understand, or at least the one I know well. It's called... Oh, what do they call it? It's called Verlan, yeah. It's called Verlan because it's... The way you speak Verlan is that you take two-syllable words and you swap the syllables around. So, français becomes c'est franc, right? Français, so c'est franc. Then you have like femme, which means girl or woman, becomes meuf, and mec, which means man, or like guy becomes comme, and so on. So you mix them around. So it's l'envers, and that's why it's called verlan. This social act is called verlan because it is l'envers, just reversed, right? L'envers means the opposite in French. So verlan is an example of a social act which is also to be found other places. It's really called backslang, where you speak backwards in order to conceal your intentions. So it's an Argot. Backslang in English is used, but not very often. There's only one word I know of, which is backslang, and that's yob. Yob means a boy, because boy is, boy backwards is yob, right? And it's not just any boy, it's a naughty boy, like Al Capone. A naughty boy is it's like a sort of delinquent kid. You know the kind of, like chavs, like these particular kinds of boys who just hangs around outside shopping malls going, hey! Yes, that is my understanding of the sociology of the UK. Those can be called yobs. Otherwise, I don't really know many examples of backslang, really. I seem to remember Charles Dickens put in a backslang of some kind. I think he said Evigem a Yenup, yeah. Evigem a Yenup is backslang for give me a penny. So just spell out give me a penny in your brain, and then spell all the words backwards. So Evigem a Yenup. So Evigem a Yenup is a way of sort of begging for money. Seems to me a bad way of begging for money. Like if you want money from somebody, you want to ask them in a way they understand, right? Why would you say that? Wouldn't you just be like, give me a penny, please? But no, they're yobs, so they do things their own way with their social acts. Coming over here with their social acts. Another more sort of maybe deeper example is Arabic has something called diglossia. They have High Arabic and Low Arabic, and you kind of use different ways of talking depending on what your social situation is. You'll speak Arabic differently in a mosque, for instance, than you will just in the market square. And that's weird and interesting, I think, because that is definitely a social act. But it is a social act not so much distinguishing classes of people, but social situations. You have different languages. Japanese is absolutely the same. Has different vocabulary for different social situations. Also, a social act. There's also something... Oh, God, I could talk about this forever, can't I? I would say I have 2.5 minutes left. There's something called a shibboleth, which is an identifying word that sort of kind of proves that you are part of a particular social class. If you use certain kinds of words in certain kinds of ways, you become identified as that part of as that group of person, yeah? One example that I kind of like is that because there was the Black Death, I don't like the fact that there was the Black Death, I'm not a monster, but there was the Black Death, and then after that there was a huge peasant revolt in London, and the Dutch-speaking Flemish people in London would use a shibboleth to realise, are you Dutch or not? And they asked you what this is, and they showed you some bread and cheese. And if you said, oh, that's bread and cheese, then they chop your head off, because they wanted to see, are you Dutch enough to know that it's not bread and cheese, it's kaas and brood, or whatever it is, in Flemish at the time. And if you didn't say it the right way, they killed you. So that's definitely a shibboleth, right? The last thing I want to mention is a French kind of backslangy kind of thing, a bit much like verlan. It's called loup-bouchon, which was invented by butchers, because boucher is loup-bouchon. The way you take it is it's pretty much like Pig Latin. You take the first letter off and you replace it with an L, and then you put the last syllable at the end or whatever. So boucher becomes loup-bouchon. Loup-bouchon must be, yeah? Loup-bouchon. So loup-bouchon, the reason that's interesting is because there was a guy called Pierre Dac, who was a humorist, a French humorist during World War II, on Radio Londres, who popularized the word. There's actually a word in French now, which is loufoque. And loufoque is his way of saying fou. Fou means crazy, right? And loufoque means crazy in this loup-bouchon version of French. And it's become a French word. So sometimes you can have a word which leaks into the the normal language from one of these anti-languages, one of these Argots, and that's kind of interesting. There's also an Argot, just like the last 20 seconds, there's an Argot in Polish prisons. If you go to prison in Poland, you will learn a particular language called Tripsera, which is just only spoken by criminals in Poland. So that is a socialite, if ever there was one. So, I am approaching the 45-minute mark, and I'm going to say that is enough for today. So, thank you extremely much for watching.